Hey, it's Chris, the Supply Chain Doctor. Over the years, I've interviewed some of the brightest minds and successful leaders in supply chain management. In May 2020, I sat down with supply chain leader Ken Ackerman to learn more about him and collect a little supply chain management history. After the interview, Ken told me about a similar interview he had with Dr. Jim Stock many years prior, and the related work Dr. Stock did. In November 2020, I was able to catch up with Dr. Stock to learn about him and his work. As an academic in the world of transportation, logistics, and what we now call supply chain management, Jim was well connected to many of the original academic thought leaders in the space. Jim did interviews with many of these thought leaders and shared them with me. The list includes Ken Ackerman, Don Bowersox, James Haskett, Bud Lalonde, John Langley Jr., Tom Menser, Tom Spee, and Daniel Wren. To carry on the great work started by Dr. Jim Stock, I'm dusting off these interviews and bringing them to you to help you get a better understanding of supply chain management and hopefully become a more effective supply chain professional.
Good afternoon. My name is James Stock, the Frank Harvey Endowed Professor of Marketing at the University of South Florida. We're here today to conduct an interview with one of the luminaries in the academic discipline of logistics and supply chain management. Purposes of this interview are several. First and perhaps foremost is to get to know the personal side of one of the leading logistics supply chain academicians, a person who's had significant influence on their profession. We often read the person's books and journal articles, listen to their presentations at academic and professional meetings, sometimes even have individual discussions with them at various events and venues. However, we rarely get to know the person beyond the professional aspects of their careers. In the field of literature and art, researchers often consider the what, why, how, who, and when of a particular book or painting, short story, poem, and so on. They speculate on what might have motivated the writer or the artist to write the book or to paint the painting, to determine the message or the story of the text or the art, and the writer's or artist's perceptions of the contributions of their work. In the same way, through this and other interviews that will be conducted of leading business scholars, as the late Paul Harvey so often expressed, we will attempt to get the rest of the story. These taped interviews will hopefully serve as supporting material for various university courses where the various works of these academicians may be discussed. There will be a significant impact in courses where history and theory are being examined, since these individuals contribute extensively to that history and theory. Each interview is based on a set of structured questions using an interview guide. Of course, the interviewees' responses are spontaneous. They may lead into other questions related to those responses. However, the general format for this and other interviews that will be conducted in the future will be similar. It's hoped that audiences who view these interviews will get a broader and richer view of the people and events that have shaped their disciplines. We hope that you will learn from what will be said and discussed during these interviews and be able to more fully appreciate and understand the significant contributions made by these luminaries in the field. So let's begin by introducing our distinguished guest. Dr. John Langley, Jr. is presently Clinical Professor of Supply Chain Management at the Penn State University in State College, Pennsylvania. He holds 3 degrees from Penn State. His B.S. degree in mathematics was earned in 1967. He completed his MBA with a concentration in finance in 1969. His Ph.D. with the major field of business logistics and supporting fields of quantitative business analysis and econometrics was awarded in 1974. John assumed his first academic position at the University of Tennessee as an assistant professor. He remained on the Tennessee faculty until 2001, where he was the John H. Red Dove Professor of Logistics and Transportation. He moved to the Georgia Institute of Technology as Professor of Supply Chain Management and Director of the Supply Chain Executive Programs. He remained at Georgia Tech until 2011, whereupon he accepted a position at Pennsylvania State University as Clinical Professor of Supply Chain Management and Director of Development for the Center for Supply Chain Research. Altogether, John has been a faculty member for almost 40 years, teaching and conducting research in marketing, logistics, and supply chain management. In recognition of his professional standing, John has received numerous awards, including the Distinguished Service Award from the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals in 1993, for outstanding achievement in logistics and supply chain management. John has received the Outstanding Alumnus Award, Business Logistics Program from Penn State in 1992. He was awarded Honorary Distinguished Logistics Professional by the American Society of Transportation and Logistics, AST&L, in 2007. In 2010, he was appointed to the program faculty at the Kuhn Logistics University in Hamburg, Germany. John was one of the early members of the National Council of Physical Distribution, NCPDM, which was the forerunner of the present-day Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, CSCMP. He served as program chairperson for the 84 Annual Conference, General Conference chairperson for the 1988 Annual Conference, member of the Executive Committee from 1984 through 1992, and president of the organization from 1990 to 1991. John also was an education advisor for the National Shippers Strategic Transportation Council, NASTRAC, and has served in many other capacities with the General Motors Logistics Supplier Council, Retail Industry Leaders Association, the Warehousing Education and Research Council, or WORK, the American Society of Transportation and Logistics, AST&L, and the Transportation Research Board, TRB. Also of significance, John has served as a member of the Academic Advisory Board for a number of prominent logistics organizations. He currently serves as a member of the board of 3 major corporations, including UTI Worldwide, Forward Air Corporation, and Averitt Express. John presently serves as a member of the editorial boards of the International Journal of Physical Distribution and Logistics Management, the International Journal of Logistics Management, European Business Review, Journal of Business Logistics, South African Journal of Transportation Supply Chain Management, and Supply Chain Quarterly. He has published a large number of articles in all of the top logistics and supply chain journals. He's co-authored 3 books in the areas of transportation, logistics, and supply chain management. John's made significant contributions to his university and the profession. His contributions in development of course materials are extensive. Over his career, John has taught more than 8,000 undergraduate, MBA, Ph.D., and executive students at Tennessee, Penn State, and Georgia Tech. John has been significantly involved in many executive development programs, both domestically and internationally. Throughout his career, John has been a value-adding contributor to his university, his students, and countless businesses that have interfaced with him, and to scholars throughout the globe. It's our distinct pleasure to get to know the personal side of this man so that we can more fully appreciate his significant professional contributions and achievements. John, welcome. Glad that we're able to interview you today.
Thank you, Jim. I'm very honored to have been asked to participate, so I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
I'm honored to be able to do the interview. And so we're using questions that will be similar across all those who have interviewed with us, and there will be some personal ones specific to you at the end that we'll ask.
Very good.
So we'll start with the easiest one. When and where were you born?
Well, I was born in 1946, and I was born in Camden, New Jersey, which is called a suburb of Philadelphia, I guess, but it's on the other side of the river there. And my parents at the time lived in South Jersey, and I spent my childhood in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia area.
Okay. Was thinking about your early childhood, we'll start sort of chronologically. Was there anything in your childhood that shaped your present personality?
The thought of my early childhood is an interesting one because to me, my remembrance is that we tended to move a lot. My dad had a job with a major corporation, and he tended to work at one location or another in Philadelphia or in Boston or in New York, for example. And also at the same time, we had changed residences a number of times. And so my recollection is that I was continually in a situation where it was time to make new friends, so forth, when Dad got transferred to a new location and so forth. And I liked that, actually. I enjoyed meeting people. And I think that in terms of something that occurred early in my life, in my childhood, the need to continually try to fit in with a group of people and so forth was something that has carried over because I've always enjoyed meeting and talking with and socializing with people. And so that's, I think, been of great value to me.
Good. Now, do you think there's a personality trait that you attained early that drove you to be successful?
Well, I don't know exactly what that is, except I would say that I've always been kind of a person who likes to plan things out, whatever it is. I think sometimes even people I work with, I drive them crazy because I try to look at into the future, whether it's travel planning or if you're doing a research project, planning it so you get all the steps to between wherever you are and its conclusion and so forth. But I like to look out and have some confidence I know where we're headed and how we're going to get there and so forth. I think part of that is because I think I'm a relatively task-oriented person. I like it when I get to the end of things, and I like getting on with new things. To say that a little bit differently, things that don't ever seem to have an end kind of drive me crazy at times. But so that I think that's one trait I have in terms of trying to be orderly and maybe sometimes a little bit too much because not everything can have a path that's going to follow, and you got to be pretty flexible sometimes to deal with the realities of whatever it is you're undertaking.
Okay. Now, if your parents were here and I were to ask them this question, how do you think they would answer? Describe John as a child. What would they say? I
think if you asked them to describe John as a child, they would probably say they loved me very much, but I was probably a handful to deal with. I was always doing something that needed to be adjusted a little bit, so forth. I was always a very active child, and so I was never getting in trouble, as you might say, but I was always doing something that maybe gave my parents fits. Like, for example, one snowy day in Massachusetts as a child, I single-handedly painted a neighbor's house that was a white house. I painted it with mud balls that were there and so forth, and my mother and my grandfather ended up having to clean the house. I don't know why they didn't make me do it, but anyway, that's the kind of thing. It's not bad trouble, but it's just little frustrations here and there, but everything went pretty smoothly.
Sounds like normal child activities.
I think so, yeah.
Do you have any specific memories from your early childhood that still are in the front of your mind?
Well, it's interesting, and maybe it's a function of as one gets older, I feel like many of the things I enjoyed doing in my childhood, I've got a vivid memory of. I mean, I recall people, I recall names, I recall things I did and so forth. The couple things. One is I just enjoyed having a lot of friends, I guess, throughout my years at school. I never found myself only associating with a single small set of people. I was always pretty good friends with a lot of people. But also as a child, I recall, and I don't think you could do this today because the world has changed a lot in 40 years or more. But when I was a kid, I used to like to collect coins.
A numismatist.
I guess maybe you could call me a numismatist. But but I did like to collect coins. It was kind of on a small scale. But at the time, we were living outside of Boston, and these were I was between about 8 and 14 years old, which I think are really formative years. But we used to have, Mom would take me and a couple of friends to the train station, and we would take the train or the MTA into, called the T now, but into Boston, that and a $20 bill, and we'd go to all the banks down on State Street, and we would be exchanging rolls of pennies and dimes and quarters looking for rare ones. And so that was kind of fun, but the point I think is interesting to me is that, I was only 10 or 11, 12 years old. And, of course, I'm in an age now where we're proud to say we have 2 grandchildren, but, I would never want a grandchild or a child of mine in this day and time to be in the streets of a major city at age 11 or 12 unaccompanied by somebody that's older. I mean, just couldn't do it. So it's a fun thing to be able to do.
So how was your coin search? Was it successful?
It was successful. One day I recall going to the bank, and I had a dollar bill and wanted to buy 2 rolls of pennies to check the pennies, and one of them was labeled Indian head pennies on the outside, and most of them were actually Indian head pennies. But I did find the most valuable mercury dime one time, 1916D, which actually I got that in change from paying an overdue book fine at the library. And later on in my youth, I traded that dime in for a bowling ball. So I still have the bowling ball.
Should have kept it.
Should have kept the dime. Yeah.
Should have kept it. Do you still collect those coins?
You know, I still have them.
Still have them?
And occasionally I get out my materials and take a look at them. I mean, not on a regular basis, but I really think that sometime when I've got a little more spare time that I might like to get back to do. Again, it's not a big scale type thing, but it doesn't have to be big scale to be a lot of fun to do so.
Sure. Well, let's move on to your school years. Go through your K through 12, although kindergarten may not have been required when you were small. That is now, but wasn't then, perhaps. What types of schools did you attend?
Well, first of all, I did have half a grade of kindergarten and half a grade of first grade. But I attended public schools my entire career. I don't think I've ever attended or worked at anything other than a public school or university. But that's just the way things were for our family. And I attended quite a few different schools. I actually attended a year of parochial school actually in Northeast Philadelphia, which I had a chance to revisit recently. I had a Penn State course we were doing in Northeast Philadelphia, and it was kind of interesting. But I actually drove past the school that I probably hadn't seen for at least 50 years, and it was vivid. I recalled exactly what it looked. Sometimes things change, sometimes they don't. But so I did attend a lot of different schools. And it seemed like for a while I was changing schools about once a year, maybe not that frequently, but once every year or two. And that was fine. I mean, it was, although it's kind of interesting because when you move from one area like a Boston to a Philadelphia, of course, all the principals are proud of their schools and, you know, anxious to tell you how wherever you came from probably doesn't measure up to the standards of the new school. But I was really privileged because all the schools that I ever attended I found to be first class in all respects.
Good. Did you have any favorite subjects as a student?
Well, this is one I'm not embarrassed to say it, but my favorite subject was actually math. And the reason that was my favorite subject, one is I was good at it, and second is, and I do regret that I say this, but at that time in my life, it required the least reading. And so, because I remember even in my college days, sometimes with an abstract math course, high-level math course, 2 pages of reading per night could be, you know, really challenging assignment. And I say I regret that because I think that had I spent more time focusing on a broader set of things, including things that I wasn't necessarily good at doing. That's a mistake some people make, I think, is, well, I don't want to judge other people, but if you only do things that you're good at doing, you're kind of missing the opportunity to learn about other things that might be more challenging. And so, but math was my favorite subject.
Okay. Did you play any sports in school?
Yeah, I played a lot of sports.
Intramurals or the
intramurals and on the school team.
Okay.
It depends actually, because my high school years, I had transferred to the high school from which I graduated outside of Philadelphia. I transferred there in 10th grade. That's a tough time to take a young guy and put him in a new school. I mean, so it took me a year or two to make new friends, so forth, and I played some sports there. They were a couple of them, you know, were on the school team type thing. But I'd played a lot of baseball, a lot of ice hockey. Back in my high school days, I did a lot of bowling, actually, and I wasn't too bad at that. But it's kind of a fun thing to do.
Well, yes, you traded that 16D dime for the bowling ball.
That's right, for the bowling ball. And so, as I said,
what was your favorite sport of all of those?
My favorite sport, it has to be either baseball or ice hockey. One of the regrets of growing older is that for most guys, when you get into your college years and definitely beyond, your love for baseball has to be, unless you're really playing at a competitive level, it's just out of necessity replaced by the playing of softball. And so I really enjoyed softball, but it was never quite the excitement of playing baseball. And ice hockey, I still play ice hockey today. It's something I've continued for a long, long time. And I'm the most senior guy in my league, But that's, just it gives me a little reason for guys not to run into me too much sometimes.
Okay. Now, how about school clubs or organizations?
Pretty active with various school clubs. Probably more active on the sports side, though. But always interested in helping out wherever I could.
Okay. With all those schools, did any particular teachers stand out that influenced you?
I've been thinking about that, and I feel like I should be able to name someone that would fit that category. But they were all pretty good, and at the high school level, I didn't really find that there was anyone that particularly stood out in terms of my mind. I was thinking about courses I took, and there's very definitely one that stood out, and that was that I took a typing class in high school. It turned out to be one of the most valuable courses I've ever taken in my life. So,
a very applied course.
Yeah.
Good. Now, how would you be described as a student? If someone externally looking at your career in secondary schools, how would they define you socially and academically?
I think they would define me as a pretty well-balanced, serious student, and also participant in the school affairs. I was always interested in the subject matter. I mean, some courses more than others and so forth. But I was always, prepared with having done my homework, and tests for me were just, performance measurement things along the way, and you try to do well on each. Of course, at the time I was in school, particularly as I got close to my college years, I was thinking about the fact that, however I performed in high school was going to impact my choice of universities, beyond my high school years. And so I took things seriously. I can't say that every subject I took was as interesting as the rest of them, but there was a lot of there were a lot of courses that I very much enjoyed and so forth.
Was typing an enjoyable course?
Typing was enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Enjoyable course. Mm-hmm.
Now, what did you like most about school, and what did you like least?
Well, I think what I liked most about school was socializing with the other students, getting to know them, becoming friends with, and then, of course, there was a lot of extracurricular things, including going to sporting events. I would support the teams and so forth. If I wasn't playing in something, I would go, and I didn't play football, but I would go to all the football games and so forth. What didn't I like about it? I liked most everything about going. You always have little things, little nits you would pick here and there, and you could change if you wanted to, or you could. But it's generally speaking, I found everything to be pretty satisfactory.
Okay. Did you get any honors while you were in school, like honor society or of those kinds of things?
Yeah, it made the honor roll. I mean, just kind of reasonably low key kinds of accomplishments that you're proud of.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about as you looked around your environment, were there sports figures or movie stars or political folks that you said, that's my idol, that's a person I really look up to?
Well, yeah, I thought about that a little bit, and I've had my share of principally athletes that I kind of look up to, in the sense of people who are genuinely good people and also very, very good at what they do. But I thought a little bit about the idol thing, and I think that the person that would be my idol was my dad, because he had qualities and characteristics that he was a very hard-working person, a very outstanding family man. I'm not sure if I could do what my dad did to be successful in his business. And by that I mean things like, we lived in Philadelphia, and every morning he got on the train and he took it to New York City, and where he worked all day. Then he came home. He probably left home at 5:30, 6 o'clock a.m. and got home at about 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. But that's 5 days a week, every week. And but back in the day, that's what you had to do and so forth. And so his determination and his way of doing things, and his I can't remember him ever complaining about anything. which is different from the way I am. People that know me even slightly well know that, unfortunately, I see the good side of some things. I see the other side. But I would say that he's the one that would satisfy my definition of an idol, a teen idol.
Okay. Now, thinking back to your teen years, is there anything during that period of your life that people would find unusual, very interesting, startling today?
I don't think so. I was just kind of a normal kid who liked to do a lot of things outdoors, and was always pretty active. As I said earlier, had a lot of different friends and so forth. So I was really nothing that would be outstanding or notable, but I had a very enjoyable childhood. I enjoyed the time I spent during those years.
Well, what caused you to go to college? Was it parental influence, your own? Was it expected to go to college? What was it for you?
Kind of all of those above and none of those above, in the sense that I'd always assumed I would go to college. My mother is a college graduate. My father was able to attend Penn State for 2 or 3 years, and then he had to get a job, so forth, so he actually didn't graduate. And it was just kind of assumed that I would go to college. Although I do remember one day that when I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, we were riding in the car somewhere, and the thought struck me, what if I can't get into college? And it was something that worried me for a long time. And but it was just something that, was the next logical step beyond high school for me, and that's the way it turned out.
Okay. Now, did you put yourself through school? Did your parents support you? A combination of those, scholarships?
Largely, my parents supported me for my undergraduate days, and then everything beyond that was, I was able to accommodate through assistantships and so forth. But I did work during the summers in a factory, industrial gas factory, kind of interesting, where you fill the big tanks of nitrogen, oxygen, and so forth, and the big things that if you ever, and I never did drop one, but if I was told that if you ever feel like you're going to lose one, you let it go and get out of the way, because they're just too big to deal with. But and at the time, and this often causes me to remember how the time value of money changes. I was earning $2 an hour. And you compare that to the value of money today, and you get completely different things. So,
of course, a point we'll look at later, it's almost equivalent to textbook writing today.
Well, it is. It is, and that's got its own challenges. We can talk about that later. But
now, did you live on campus, off campus, dormitories, fraternity?
I lived my first year. I lived in a dormitory at Penn State. Made a lot of friends there. Then I joined a fraternity. Most of Penn State's fraternities are located just off campus, right adjacent to the campus, and I lived in a fraternity house right nearby, and spent 3 years there.
Which fraternity?
It's Delta Sigma Phi for Penn State people. That's the pink elephant, which I am happy to report at the time of this taping. It's a house that's very, very successful over the intervening 40 years, though. It's had its ups and downs, but it's pulled itself up by the bootstraps each time and come back even stronger. So I'm proud to say that the house is still functioning well.
And how was it fluctuating when you were a member?
It was strong. It was a very strong house, yeah. Although I do remember my senior year, we had a few of the guys that decided that they needed to move out of the fraternity house so they had more time for studying and so forth. I wish I could say the fraternity house environment was one that was always conducive to studying and being serious about things, but unfortunately that's something you got to. As a matter of fact, that's probably a big challenge, is to that was back in the day, of course, but to try to balance the social and the fun aspects of being in a fraternity with the need to do well academically, because we all know people in college that maybe had a little too much fun and never did get the degree that they went there to study for to begin with, and that's just unfortunate.
So how did you end up at Penn State?
Lived in Philadelphia at the time. It was the state university, and my dad had gone there, and just seemed like a pretty good choice. And when I visited Penn State on a campus tour, I decided this was the place that if I were accepted, I would definitely like to go. I think it's one of the most beautiful campuses you can find. There are other great ones we could talk about that are also very nice to be on, but this is no exception from one of the best. So.
Okay. Did you apply anywhere else other than Penn State?
I did. I applied to Bucknell University.
Okay.
And, it's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit later about other aspects of my career and what I've studied and what I've done. But had I gone to Bucknell, it might have been a very different person emerged from the college experience, because the kinds of things I studied at Penn State, particularly in the long term, probably aren't among the curricular elements at Bucknell. So we'll never know that.
The Supply Chain Doctor interviews thought leaders and visionaries who have had an impact on the field of supply chain management, shares professional development concepts for practitioners, and investigates current and future trends in the industry. Interested in sponsoring this show to help you get your message out? Send a note to chris@thescdr.com. We can also help with world-class supply chain education and workshops for you and your team. Thanks for listening.